but it's not all me talking. There are some bits where I'm going to ask for a bit of participation or just writing in the chat, although I was just saying to Danny, I just realized that when I share my screen, I can't actually read the chat. So Danny's going to chip in and be my helper and let me know what you say. And I have got a few little bits of video as well, just to interject so that it's not just me talking for all that time. And I will go ahead and share my screen and hopefully it will work. Technology, not my forte. And I can't see your faces when I do this. So I'm hoping that Danny is going to pop in and audibly tell me if you can't see my screen. And I'm going to assume that you can otherwise, and I will just start. So ocean health and our health are intrinsically connected, and my intention with this talk is to inspire you to connect with water, to understand why our ocean is important to us as humans, and to empower you to act in ways that are beneficial for both you, your health, and the health of the blue planet. But before I dive in, pun intended, can anyone tell me how many times can you fold an A4 piece of paper? Just stick a number in the chat and maybe Danny can tell me what the guesses are. And I'm hoping you can see me, even though I can't see any video boxes. But what happens when you fold a piece of paper is each time it doubles in thickness. I'm not going to do it to the end because give it away, but you can see that it gets much thicker each time you fold it. So Danny, are there any comments in the... Yeah.
Got 33, 100, 48, 64.
Okay. So it's commonly thought that you can only fold an A4 piece of paper 8 times because it eventually gets so thick, it just gets a bit challenging to fold. But there was a record attempt in America where they did fold a piece of paper 12 times, but it was massive, like football-sized piece of paper, football pitch-sized piece of paper, and it was really, really thin. So bearing in mind that it doubles in thickness each time, how many times do you reckon you can fold an A4 piece of paper until it's the width of Earth, our blue planet, the real one, not the one in the picture? And again, just drop some numbers in the chat. And I'll rely on my trusty assistant.
300.
Uh-huh. Any more guesses?
I can't even begin to guess.
So it's only 37. 37 times, because each time it doubles, so there's only 37. And bearing that in mind, how many times do you think you would fold an A4 piece of paper until theoretically it was the thickness of the width of the Milky Way? And I know there's someone here that's a space fan. Any guesses?
137.
Mm-hmm. Getting closer.
80, 120.
Great.
100.
103. So whoever said 100 was the closest.
Well done, Amy P.
Well done. Well done. And a scientist. So yeah, I will come back to the significance of that later on. So first of all, I'm just going to talk a little bit about water and me. This story isn't about me, it's about you and it's about all of us. But just so that you know who I am and why I feel qualified to talk about water, I'll give you a bit of background about myself. So that's me. So I loved being in water from a very early age, as you can see of me sitting in a bucket here. And you could say that my relationship with water falls into 4 buckets. So first of all, it's my sanctuary. And when my mum was in hospital, I turned to water for peace and solace. I took up paddle sports, and I found that volunteering and time on the water helped me to heal from the trauma of spending day in and day out next to the hospital bed, wondering if my mum would live or die. And I'm pleased to say that she is alive and well and on this call in the audience. But water has always been my sanctuary, my go-to place in time of stress, be it a bath or the beach. And I turned to paddling and conservation paddle trips during that time, and that really helped me to heal from a traumatic period in my life. So ocean empathy would be the second bucket. And really that started with scuba diving, and diving brought me closer to the creatures in the ocean and a deeper connection and understanding that some of the creatures in the ocean are not so different to me, and many of them are fascinating beyond comprehension. And also when I was traveling, I was volunteering on a turtle project in Costa Rica, and that also sort of exacerbated this ocean empathy that I felt. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about that experience that I had in Costa Rica. So it was the middle of the night, another hot and sticky one. And despite the heat, I was covered from head to foot in an attempt to keep the mosquitoes at bay. I could tell it wasn't working. And it was pitch black, except for the moonlight shimmering on the Caribbean Ocean. And my eyes had only just adjusted for the 4-hour stint that I had patrolling the beach that night. I was covering zone 3, which meant that I'd already walked 2 kilometers along the beach from where I was staying. And there'd been no sign of nesting leatherback turtles that night so far. A few stray dogs, which I swiftly chased away. Otherwise, it was just my partner and I and our guide, who is an ex-poacher himself. And all you could hear were the lapping waves, the buzz of cicadas, and the ever-present mosquitoes. Another ordinary night on patrol, also we thought. Then on the horizon, I saw a figure moving really oddly on the water's edge. And as we approached, I could see a rope heading out into the water. And I felt my body both tense with adrenaline and tense with fear and rush with adrenaline all at once. And I held my breath in this kind of embodied fear reaction as I was trying to work out what was going on. And there she was, probably the first green turtle to have come up to the beach that season. It was mostly leatherbacks until that point, but the seasons were changing. And she was lashed up by her front flipper, being dragged along on the water's edge, fighting for her life. And I felt this rush of emotion wave all over my body as I used broken Spanish to ask our guide what to do. Policia, I asked him, because it is illegal to poach turtles. They eat the meat of the green turtles in Costa Rica, but they don't really enforce the rules over there. And I will come back to that story later on so that you can find out what happened to that little turtle. And I just want to move on now to the next couple of buckets, the next one being ocean activism. And when I got back from that trip, I sought out local projects and I found Whale Fest, Incredible Oceans. And I campaigned for the freedom of cetaceans with this massive team of people, for freedom from captivity. And I joined these paddle cleanup expeditions to pull plastic out of the waterways, reaching national and international press, and have been part of teams to pull over 10 tons of rubbish from our wild water environments. And as part of those, the very first trip that I did was this trip where we paddled by kayak 300 kilometers from Bristol to London. And so I'm just going to show you a short film about that trip.
She's extraordinary, my jeans are torn. Her lips taste cherry, my eyes are worn. They said she'll run away, they said she'll run away from here. She's extraordinary, my jeans are torn. Her lips taste cherry, my eyes are worn. They said she'll run away, they said she'll run away from here. Boys.
The Coast to Coast adventure is a group of women paddling from Bristol to London, going from tidal waters the whole width of the UK to tidal waters the other side of London. It's a 300-kilometre journey, and we are picking up plastic en route to try and raise awareness of the issues we have with pollution in our oceans.
The highlight for me are just the people that we've got in our team. There's just been so much laughter, and I've just made so many good friends for life already, and just the banter. I've just been laughing and smiling every day, and you don't get that in normal life. Only on a tough expedition does that come out.
I chose to be part of the Coast to Coast adventure because I was looking to do something new, to do a new challenge. I know from various things that I run off and do whenever I can that any expeditions like this are usually full of like-minded people, interesting people. You come away being inspired, lots of stories, and obviously to be able to clean things up, make a difference, do something useful whilst having a bit of an adventure as well was perfect.
I've just quit my job as a lawyer, and I want to focus more on conservation and awareness via adventure. I'm also a volunteer campaign manager for Incredible Oceans, and we're hoping to make an awesome inspirational art piece out of the plastics that we're collecting so that we can take it to various events and on a school's roadshow. The highlights so far, well, it has to be sitting in a hot tub last night drinking champagne where we were wild camping in Staines, and a lovely couple came out and told us that they had done some adventuring themselves, and they were really impressed with the project and what we were doing, and did we want to come in their garden and go in the hot tub and have a drink? But of course. But I think it's also, we've picked up a lot. I knew we'd pick up a lot of plastics, but it's really interesting seeing what we've picked up and what the mixture of things are, and some really interesting items as well, and toys and things like minions and bicycles and all sorts of stuff. So it's been really, really interesting.
Something I probably recommend to someone who's doing an adventure like this is actually, Bex and I, we talked about it once, and as soon as we came up with the idea, we made it happen. And I think a lot of ideas they just don't turn into anything, they get forgotten about. But yeah, as soon as you think up an adventure that you really want to do, then you really have to start the ball rolling. And once it gets rolling, it doesn't stop, it's just amazing.
I don't want to stay here too long. Sing my songs and twiddle my thumbs. I ain't chasing fame or tricks, building bricks or your crucifix.
So that was the first of the paddle trips that I did. I went on to do a couple more. And the last bucket, so to speak, is ocean advocacy with my connection with water. And off the back of those trips, I then went on to create this toolkit for British canoeing to empower paddlers across the country to do their bit to clean up their local waterways. I also trained as a Blue Health coach with Lizzie Larbalastier in Cornwall, which means that I take clients into blue spaces and I use metaphor and the landscape of the beach in order to help people to find new perspectives and evoke this childlike curiosity that you get when you are at the coast. And I've also spoken at various events. So what I don't want you to know about me, though, is that as my dad worked for Shell, sorry, Dad, you are on this call, I was brought up on oil money from one of our planet's biggest polluters. And my fascination for ocean creatures also led me to insisting that we go to SeaWorld as a child. And if you haven't seen the film Blackfish, which is featured in this image, obviously, then I recommend you do so. It tells the story of why cetaceans in captivity is not such a great idea. And I believe that when I went to SeaWorld as a child, I saw Tillicum, who is the star of the film, who is pictured on this advert that you can see, and who sadly has since died in captivity. And when diving in Borneo in 2012, I heard the explosion of dynamite fishing when I was underwater scuba diving, and it shook me to the core. And I saw the devastation of plastic pollution in what should have been pristine marine parks. And yet it still took 3 years until I swung into action to do anything at all about my personal impact on the planet. But why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because it's these shadows that we carry around in life that are often the source of our feelings of shame and guilt around impossible ideals of perfection, and which form the basis of our fears. We create stories around these feelings that prevent us from taking ownership and agency over our choices. But by owning our shadows and bringing them forwards and being honest about them, we take the power away from our fears. And this allows us to move into the light. It allows us to connect with each other and to show up in a state of flow rather than stagnation. And when we understand that no one is perfect, we can see that imperfect actions are better than none, and that there is gold to be found in our imperfections and lessons to grow from. And I've been that person that's held back by imposter syndrome, by stories of not being enough, not knowing enough, and I've worked through my fears. And I'm now on a mission to support eco-conscious people and ecopreneurs who are held back by fear and self-doubt and who are trying to make a difference. And I support you to get out of your own way, to step into your personal power so that you can connect with yourself and nature, and in doing so, create a life that works for both you and the planet. But the biggest fears that I hear my clients say, and people that I talk to in conversations about ocean issues, are despair and denial. Despair in that the issues are too big, and denial that they are for someone else to fix. And I won't deny that there is an element of needing the higher powers to now take more action. But it is also down to all of us as individuals to put the pressure on them to do so. And also a lot of activists, they focus on the problems, not the solutions. That leaves people feeling afraid and overwhelmed. But what is fear? Fear is an embodied process and not a thinking process. So just like I described when I saw the turtle lash up, being dragged along in the sea, I felt that as an embodied experience. I felt that my breathing stopped, that I felt this rush of adrenaline in my body. I could feel it as an embodied process. And that's because it's our nervous system reacting to what it sees as a perceived threat. And normally the intention of our fear is to protect us, but it also comes from this part of our brain which is known as the ego, which is like this 5%. It's like the tip of the iceberg, when there's 95% of our unconscious, our kind of autopilot, that is also going on. But what the ego wants is, it doesn't like change. So it wants things to stay the same, and it wants to protect you, which makes sense from an evolutionary psychology perspective, because when we were hunter-gatherers, we needed to use this heightened sense of awareness to flee from predators. And those of our ancestors who were anxious enough to hide in bushes are the ones who survived. So we still have this bias towards negativity and anxiety, and we haven't evolved to deal with the trappings of a digital world. And when we perceive threat, our sympathetic nervous system is activated. And this is commonly known as fight, flight, and lesser known freeze. Wallace J. Nichols, in his book, The Blue Mind, or he's the author of the book, The Blue Mind, he coined the phrase red mind to describe this anxious, overconnected, and overstimulated state that now defines the new normal of modern life, which is really useful in some situations. But when we stay in this state for a really long time, many of us, which like many of us will have experienced over the pandemic, we can easily flip into grey mind, which is almost like burnout, and characteristics or characterized by fatigue, lack of motivation, and feelings of overwhelm. And this probably sounds familiar to some, if not all of you, because like I say, this heightened sense of fight and flight, this sympathetic nervous system will have been activated whether you've been aware of it or not during the pandemic. And the thing about these fears is that they try and snatch our attention, and the original intention of protection gets lost amidst our thoughts. And we start thinking about bad memories from the past, and we create these catastrophizing scenarios about the future. We come up with stories of lack, not being enough, or doing enough, or craving things to be different to how they actually are. And when we ruminate about problems and perceived personal inadequacies in this way, it becomes overwhelming. And I like to think of this in the context of a computer. So, you know, when you have a computer running with loads and loads of different programs open, eventually it starts to slow down a bit because it's feeling a bit overloaded, and eventually the computer might crash. When we're in this red mind state, we often try and think our way out of it. But like I said before, fear is an embodied process and not a thinking one. So if I go back to that computer analogy, trying to think your way out of fear or out of this situation, out of this emotion, is just like opening another window on your computer screen. And so it's putting even more strain on the system. And so to bring it back to the analog world, you could say that the computer is a bit like your consciousness, and the programs your thoughts. So the problem with this autopilot way of thinking is that eventually our thoughts become patterns, and these become well-trodden grooves or habits. One of my teachers uses the analogy of drawing a line in water. So, you know, when you draw a line in water, it disappears pretty much straight away. So if you are in the present moment with awareness, with consciousness, then it's like drawing this line in the water, and it just kind of disappears, and on you go. You haven't left a mark behind. But if you're going about your life slightly less consciously, then it's a bit like drawing a line in the sand. It will stay there for a bit longer, and then eventually maybe rub out if you do something differently. But if you don't bring awareness and presence to your consciousness and to your current experience, it's like carving a line in stone, and it becomes much, much harder to change. Plenty of mindfulness leaders from the East and from the West use water as an analogy to explain this too. So this is a bit esoteric, I know, but bear with me. You could say that your consciousness is a bit like the sky. So like in this picture that we have in front of us there, of, I think this is Sipadan in Borneo. You could say that the sky is like your consciousness, and the clouds like your thoughts. The clouds are also obviously made of water. Or you could think of it like a river in flow with leaves floating on the surface. And imagine yourself sitting on the banks of the river, and you're just watching your thoughts drift past. And when you look at thoughts in this way, you can start to see that you are not your thoughts, and that thoughts are just a part of you, a part of your consciousness. Just like they're only part of this picture, thoughts are the stories that we tell ourselves based on interpretations and experiences of the world. And they are just an aspect of that experience and not the whole experience itself. But we quite often treat our thoughts as if they are real and as if they are everything. But when you can see yourselves, so when you think of it like this, you can then start to think about another analogy, and perhaps then see yourselves as a bit like an ocean. And just like oceans change state, sometimes choppy and sometimes still, this becomes a great metaphor for life itself. And I like to think of mindfulness, which is the practice of paying attention in the present moment, as a bit like a flotation device or a buoyancy aid, which I use when I'm paddling out in my kayak or my paddleboard. So the more you practice, so the more you spend time with awareness in the present moment, the more air you put into your jacket, and the easier it is to ride the waves. And the more unconscious you are, the less air you have in your jacket. So the harder you have to work to stay afloat. And just like the ocean changes state, so can you. And this is where water can also play a key role in our well-being. So to create less fear and more love, which in my opinion is the solution to creating a life that works for you and the planet, we need an embodied approach and not a thinking approach. So on a really practical level, there are some really easy ways that you can change state. And we actually only experience any state for 90 seconds. So if you're experiencing an emotion like anger or fear or whatever for longer than that, then you're likely re-triggering it due to those ingrained in stone patterns that you've carved for yourself. And if we use conscious awareness to spot these patterns and triggers, then we can choose to change our behavior and reactions. So the more we can become aware of our thoughts and our consciousness, the more we can change them. There's some really easy ways to change state. Gratitude practice is one of them. And when I say that, I don't mean just writing down 3 things that you're grateful for each day, which is the really common way that people describe a gratitude practice. There's been loads of studies around gratitude that have found also that just even by spending 2 weeks with a gratitude practice, the positive effects is felt in your neurology 6 months later, even if you stop that practice. But what I mean by this gratitude practice is to sit and think about things that you're grateful for, but in an embodied way. How does it make you feel? And then say to yourself, thank you. So thank you for the sun, for making me feel lighter and more joyful today, would be an example. Journaling also is a really great way to detach yourself from the thoughts. So when you write down your thoughts, you dissociate from them. And so when you speak them or write them down, you get a different perspective to your thoughts, and you can detach and disassociate from them. Meditation and breath work are also really easy ways to change states. So when you're breathing, when you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up, and when you breathe out, it slows down. So by doing balancing breaths or extended exhales, you can help to access that parasympathetic nervous system and really help to calm yourself and your body down. Physiologically, so laughing, moving, exercise, yoga. So obviously the BNHC is a charity, and it is a really great organisation that offers online yoga classes. So definitely recommend checking out some of their classes. And they are a charity, have been affected by the pandemic. And although this talk is free, it would be really great if you can support them as a charity. So I'm just going to say a cue now for Danny to drop a link to their GoFundMe into the chat. And location is a really easy way to change your state as well. So getting into blue space, obviously. And that's when we start to get to this connection of blue space and how water affects us. And what is that? And there's this great quote by Céline Cousteau, which I love. Part of me doesn't want to know why I love the water. A part prefers to see its effects as magical, something unknown, indeed unknowable, but deeply felt. But when I consider what's at stake and the fact we must encourage people to change their behaviour and shift government policies, if we're going to restore the health of the world's water systems, I've come around to agreeing it's time to explain the magic. So what is this magic that she's talking about? And why is blue space now even more important to protect? So let's start with us. We are water, literally. An average adult is 50 to 65% water, and our brain is 80% water. So next time you feel stuck, it's worth remembering that it's quite literally difficult to be stuck because you are on a cellular level more liquid than solid. So being in blue space helps us to regulate our nervous system by switching from that fight, flight, freeze, sympathetic nervous system and into our parasympathetic rest and digest state. Water spaces evokes in us a state of mind that was referred to by Wallace J. Nichols in his book, The Blue Mind, as Blue Mind. His book is the same name, I guess. And many scientific studies over the last 10 years or so have and continue to document the link between water, spending time in and around water environments, the benefits of inducing positive mood, reducing negative mood and stress, and in some cases even more than green space does. There was a study out of Exeter University that found that it can be even more beneficial than green space. And his book seeks to collate a lot of the science, so I totally recommend reading it. For those of you who are Brighton based, there is also Dr. Catherine Kelly, who is part of the swim group that I swim with, the Salty Seabirds. And she also has this book, Blue Spaces, How and Why Water Can Make You Feel Better. And that is coming out, I believe, in a couple of days' time. So you can pre-order that. But Wallace J. Nichols, he says, the term blue mind describes the mildly meditative state we fall into when we're near, in, on, or underwater. He says, it's the antidote to what we refer to as red mind, which is the anxious, overconnected, and overstimulated state that defines the new normal of modern life. And research has proven that spending time near the water is essential to achieving elevated and sustained happiness. So that's a direct quote from him. But you don't have to be by the sea in order to access blue mind. You can access this quality by watching virtual water, by taking a shower, bath, lake, river, pond, having a mindful glass of water. Being around water stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the vagus nerve is responsible for that parasympathetic rest and digest aspect of your nervous system. And it also helps us to manage fear and stress and to move from red mind to blue, as well as a whole ton of other health benefits like reducing blood pressure. And just like toning a muscle, you can stimulate your vagus nerve to achieve good vagal tone, and blue mind is one of the ways to do that. You can also do that by positive social relationships. But if you think about what you're usually doing when you're in nature or in wild water spaces, that's likely a social activity. Cold water immersion. And if you're interested in learning more about that, then the go-to expert on that really is Wim Hof, otherwise known as the Iceman. Gargling, singing, humming, laughing, yoga and meditation. So again, a little plug for BNHC, Brighton Natural Health Centre, and exercise. So also the great thing about our brain is that we can fool it. Have you ever noticed yourself daydreaming about a holiday that you have been on or about to go on? I've just stopped sharing my screen for a second then. When you daydream in this way about water, places that are special to you, or you're thinking about your holiday or whatever, your brain doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So it actually triggers these feelings in your body, thinking that you're actually there. So everyone has their water, you know, that special place that you go to. It could be a beach holiday, it could be underwater, it could be a lake or a pond with fond memories of feeding the ducks, or a place that, you know, a place that evokes a positive emotion for you. So I want you to just take a moment just now and think about what is your water, and go there now. If you feel comfortable to do so, just close your eyes and see what you can see. Hear what you can hear. Feel what you can feel. Maybe you can feel the water on your skin. Maybe you can feel the air on your skin. What can you smell? Can you smell maybe the salt in the air, or freshly cut grass nearby, or whatever it is for you? Just notice what you notice, and take a couple of deep breaths whilst you're there. And when you're exhaling, make an audible exhale. When you exhale in this way, it's another way of sending that message to your nervous system that everything is okay. So let's take just a couple of deep breaths. What do you notice when you go there to your water? You might notice that your breathing slows, your body relaxes, maybe your mind clears, maybe it wanders as well. That's what they do. And while you're thinking about what you noticed, the ocean is breathing you, as the oxygen from every second breath that you take is provided by our oceans. Now, the marine biologist that's listening is probably going to correct me on here, but I'm going to say that it's a combination of the phytoplankton and the seagrasses in the ocean that provides around 70% of the oxygen in the air that we breathe. And the oceans are quite literally not an optional extra for us. We are so deeply connected to the planet's water cycle on a physical, cognitive, and spiritual level. We are part of this ecosystem that we live on, not apart from it. And if you still have your eyes closed, then I would invite you to now come back. And I'm going to ask you again, can anyone tell me what this is? And I'm going to need my vocal translator in Danny, if she's around, to tell me if anyone can guess what this is, and write it in the chat. Have we got any?
So we've got a planet, a pale blue dot. The closest thing is a star for me.
Who wrote a pale blue dot?
Grace.
Yes, because she knows what the answer is. Yes, it is Earth. It is a pale blue dot. Carl Sagan refers to it as a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. And Wallace J. Nichols, who wrote the Blue Minds book, he refers to a blue marble as if you hold a blue marble at arm's length, then that is what our planet looks like from space. And we refer to our planet as Earth. Yeah, it's 70% water. So surely it is more accurately described as planet water or planet ocean. And we often think of ourselves as separate from nature. But when you look at the ecosystem that we live on in this way, we can quite clearly see that we are just a tiny part of it. And yet we seem to have such a big impact on it. And so with that in mind, what do you think is the biggest threat facing our ocean? And here's some ideas. I'm not saying that they are, that the answer is one of those or limited to that. So yeah, again, stick some answers in the chat, and Danny, I'm going to have to use your site again. What do you think is the biggest threat facing our ocean?
So I was going to say, it sounds awful, but just humans. And then we've got human overpopulation, people, climate change, or us. So yeah, I think everyone's sort of on a similar page with just humans, and plastic.
Yeah.
Created by humans.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. So for me, it's disconnection. We have become so disconnected from nature that we almost don't see ourselves as part of it anymore. Whereas we are part of this ecosystem. It's not an ego system. So can anyone tell me who this is?
So Amy says Sylvia Earle.
Excellent. Yeah. Good work. It is indeed Sylvia Earle, also known as Her Deepness. She has spent over 7,000 hours underwater, led more than 100 ocean expeditions. She says, even now, less than 5% of the ocean has been seen, let alone explored or even mapped with the same precision that we've mapped the land, the moon, Mars, or Jupiter. And that, I feel, is, for me, one of the kind of biggest illustrations of this disconnection that we have from the ocean, but from nature as well at large. And when we did explore the ocean, when we reached the bottom of the deepest trench, what did we find? A plastic bag. And they are also now finding that the new creatures that they are finding right in the deep depths of the Mariella Trench have also got plastic in their stomach. But I don't need to tell you the impact that we have had on our blue planet. Sir David Attenborough has done a fine job of drawing attention to the problems that we face. And even if you haven't seen the Blue Planet 2 series, I'm certain that you've heard of it. And ocean and climate change are also intrinsically connected. Our oceans absorb the excess heat from our emissions and the glaciers reflect it. And I like to use this as a kind of an explanation of that. So which of these t-shirts would you rather wear on a super hot day? One or two? Let's have some more comments in the comment box. Sorry, Danny, I'm gonna have to use you again.
So we've got a couple of votes for one at the moment.
Yeah. Good stuff. That makes sense. Yeah.
With the sort of questioning.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Because the paler colour, it reflects off, whereas the deeper colour absorbs. And that's exactly what our oceans do for the climate, and why losing the ice caps is such a tragedy. And sadly, in July in 2019, just in 1 month, Greenland lost a section of its ice cap the size of the UK and 2.5 meters deep. So it does feel a little bit like we need some kind of superhero to sweep in and sort out this mess for us. Maybe someone like Spider-Man, who famously said, with great power comes great responsibility. But how about we flip that to, with great responsibility comes great power. And if we all take a bit more responsibility, then imagine what we can achieve. And there are some really simple actions that we can all take. I'll talk about a few. There are loads, there are more, and I'm happy to talk about others at the end if you're interested in doing so. So for me, the number one thing is self-care, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. And just like in an aeroplane, the adults are supposed to put on their air mask first before children, we need to do the same for us and for the planet. Consuming mindfully, consciously, what I mean by that is asking yourself before you buy anything, do you really need it? Is it really adding value to your life? Does it support a circular economy? Who made it, and what is its ecological footprint? We really need to start asking these questions much more. Moving your money away from banks that invest in fossil fuel, switching to green power. 70% of global emissions do come from energy production. So people like Ecotricity, Octopus, I think Bulb is another one, but don't quote me on that. Eat less fish and meat. We have already exploited to the maximum 80% of the fisheries in our ocean, and there are now more cows than people on our planet, and that has massive impact, which I'm not going to go into today or now, but I can talk about another time if you're interested in knowing more. Travel less and more mindfully, and connect with nature more, especially blue spaces, and also inspire and empower people. Tell the brands that you use and the people that represent you that you want them to be more responsible for their impact on nature. There's a few things that businesses can do. Encourage your staff to get out in nature, to take care of your staff and their well-being. Work with suppliers who have eco-conscious values, and be transparent about who your suppliers are so that you can engage and ensure that your impact isn't being outweighed by negative ethics. Becoming a B Corp is the sort of highest level of sustainability for a company. And yeah, thinking about one of the things I quite often hear as a reason for not adopting sustainable supply chains is that people have the misconception that it could be more expensive, but it's not always more expensive. And actually, you also reach new markets. Forbes found that 66% of consumers are willing to spend more on a product if it comes from a sustainable brand, and that increases to 73% if you just look at millennials. Or as a company, you can pay it forward, and these are some organizations that can help you to give a percentage of your profit or revenue or donate based on the number of sales that you make in order to work with projects that improve the ecological environment. So all comes back to those stories. It comes back to those stories and the fears that we tell ourselves. And I wonder what stories are getting in the way of you taking action. Here are some really common ones that I come across. I'm too small to make a difference, or I'm just one of 8.7 billion, or whatever it is that our current global population is. I'm not smart enough. I don't have the experience. I'm not the expert. Our leaders are too short-sighted. The system is too broken. And let's get rid of all of those, because they are just beliefs. And because we create our stories, we can change them. And so, for instance, if you think of I'm too small to make a difference, you can just look at the impact that one small schoolgirl has had on the world in Greta Thunberg. And I love this quote by Margaret Mead: "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." I don't have the experience. Well, no one has the experience until they do. I'm sure Ed Sheeran at some point in his life had never picked up a guitar, and he is now the global pop icon that he is. I am not an expert. So what? Nor is Greta, and nor is Sir David. Our leaders are too short-sighted, so let's help them to see. And the system is too broken, as the other one that people come up with. And I can't pronounce this lady's name, but Erica Chenoweth, I think her name was. Anyway, she was a political scientist at Harvard University. She looked at hundreds of campaigns over the last century and found that it takes around 3.5% of the population actively participating in a non-violent protest to ensure serious political change. Only 3.5%. So our beliefs, they are just these stories that we create, and we can change them by changing our perspective. Which brings me back to the Turtle Project in Costa Rica. And you'll recall that we left the turtle with the poacher being dragged along the water's edge. And after some careful negotiations, the man could see that I wasn't going to let him leave with the turtle, and he relented. We freed her from her binds and watched as she made her way back out into the black water. Now, only 1 in 1,000 baby turtles make it to breeding age, and so each and every one is a life worth protecting. And though on average they lay about 100 odd eggs per nest, and they nest 2 to 8 times per season. So saving that turtle gave the potential for over 500 new lives. And it's this tale that I come back to time and time again whenever I look at the issues that we're facing, and I hear someone saying, "But will my small actions make a difference?" I made a difference to that one turtle and the ripple effect has enormous potential. So next time you wonder if that next small step matters, remember the tale of the turtle. Or you might be familiar with the story, with the starfish story of the little girl who is picking up all of the starfish and one by one throwing them back into the sea. And the old lady that questions her because there are thousands of starfish and miles of beach. And she just picks up another one and throws it back in the sea and says, I made a difference to that one. So we know that stories of doom and negativity lead to despair and denial, but with stories of hope and positivity, we can create a ripple effect. And if I was today to take responsibility to just talk to 3 people about how their tiny actions could make a difference and how awesome and connected to nature we are, and then I didn't tell anyone else, and then they told 3 people each, and then they didn't tell anyone else, and then they told 3 people and then didn't tell anyone else, how long do you think it would take until the whole world knew? And again, I invite you to stick a comment or a guess in the box. Let me know what you think. I'm going to have to call on Danny again. How long do you think it would take?
I'm trying to guess myself. I want to say something really exciting, like a month or something like that. So someone else has said a month. 6 months.
Yeah, interesting. Big difference. Yeah, it's 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh. And we got another 6 months as well. So yeah, wow.
3 weeks. And so the next time you talk to someone who doesn't know or understand their connection to the ocean, drop in some inspiration, like dropping a pebble in water and watch the ripples spread. Because just like folding paper, information spreads exponentially. And I feel hope, with more and more science showing how nature is essential for our well-being. The hope is that this research will influence policymakers around the world to step up and protect our natural water spaces and their biodiversity. And COVID has reconnected many of us with the importance of nature and the health and well-being benefits of slowing down, connecting with the natural world. And so the question now is how to retain and increase this connection as we emerge from lockdown, social distancing, whatever we are emerging from. And the Guardian reported here that we are now even more concerned about our quality of life. And people want this to take precedence over economic indicators. And for sure, the old system is broken and change is coming. Legality is not a guide to morality. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could embrace a system like they have in Bhutan, where they measure their growth via a happiness index instead of GDP? And after the first lockdown, Surfers Against Sewage, SAS, they did a survey and found that 84% of people were most looking forwards to going to the beach after lockdown. And obviously we've been in and out of lockdown since this study. 90% agreed that the pandemic provides an opportunity to rebuild an economy around taking care of the ocean and climate. And a whopping 90% stated that their behaviour and attitude would be modified in some way. And we've also seen a massive increase in sea swimming, 200% increase in sea swimming. It's certainly been the sanctuary that has got me through lockdown, and I'm feeling immensely grateful for living so close to the sea. So if we are so disconnected, how do we reconnect? And so to think about that, I want you to just take a moment and have a think. You can put something in the chat if you want, but I won't call on Danny again because she's done a great job already. But just take a moment just to think, where and when in your daily life do you come across nature? Is that in your home, on your way to work? Do you have to actively seek it? Or have you surrounded yourself by nature at home? And how can you bring more nature connection into your routine? Now, here are some ideas. Open a window. It's amazing the power of just getting the stale air and circulating fresh air within your own home. Drink a glass of water. Like I said, we are water. So many of us don't drink enough of this essential element, which is so intrinsically part of us. Ponder a pattern. So nature has these things called fractals, which are these repeating patterns. So you see them in the pattern on a leaf, or like a broccoli head type thing, or a flower, or just any nature's patterns. You could have a coffee and ponder the clouds. Take a moment to connect with nature. Any nature connection regulates your nervous system and creates this embodied response that sends you into that rest and digest, parasympathetic, blue mind. Take your lunch outside as the weather gets better, no excuses. Take a listen to the sounds of nature. For those of you who can't get out into nature quite so easily, you can listen to nature, listen to the sounds of the ocean, listen to the sound of birdsong. Both of these have also been found to be really effective at regulating your nervous system. Take your shoes off, get outside and feel the earth beneath your feet. This really helps to ground you. And if you do find yourself in this thinking brain, a really great way to get out of it is to literally send your awareness down to your feet and feel the earth beneath you. Walk or swim in a blue space. Obviously, I have to put that in. And it's, for me, one of the most powerful things that you can do. Images and video. You can surround your workstation with pictures of beach holidays, change your screensaver to an underwater image, whatever images that are in your life that evoke those feelings for you. And there are also some great films that you can watch to connect with water, especially. So there's this great film, Undercurrents, which is the whole film is almost like a meditation of your connection with water and blue mind. Also features my teacher, the Blue Health coach teacher, Lizzie from Cornwall. If you haven't seen The Octopus Teacher on Netflix, I massively recommend that. Again, it's a bit like a meditation, and it's a great understanding of our connection and fascination, and then this open ocean empathy kind of with the creatures that are in the sea, and in particular this guy's relationship with an octopus. And obviously there's the Blue Planet 2 series if you haven't watched it. But I wonder, what does the ocean mean to you? And I am going to call on you again, Danny, because I'm going to ask you guys to think of one or two words that come to mind when you think about the ocean, or what does the ocean mean to you? Just stick a couple of words in the chat.
We've got life and peace, serenity.
Beautiful.
I'd say like freedom, calming and reflection. Connects me to our natural and place in the universe. Regeneration. Yeah, so connects me to our natural world and our place in the universe. Regeneration, being. Space and openness. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Lovely. Yeah, to me, it's all of those things. It's everything. It's the air we breathe, the food we eat, our body, our brain, our life force. It's everything. And also for me, the antidote to fear, like I've said before, is love. And who better to spark love and create curiosity in our blue planet than Sir David Attenborough. And I want to remind you of the trailer for the Blue Planet series. So I'm going to play that in a moment. And while you're watching it, I just want you to notice emotions that are triggered by it and notice how you feel them in your body. To be more conscious of those emotions, excuse me. I'm just going to hit play. So I wonder what emotions that brought up for you. Where's my screen? Load that. So it comes down to this really in the end for me. We will conserve only what we love, and we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And I'm just going to show you one other really short clip, because the trailer of the Undercurrents film, I think, also really helps to explain this living consciously, this connection, this blue mind connection that we have with water and its effect on us. And to live more consciously is to spend time in stillness, to spend more time in your body and less time ruminating in your head, to connect with your heart and gut brains, and to use nature and especially water space to shift your state and to become more conscious, to evoke that childlike curiosity. I truly believe that the changes that we need come from conscious awareness and in doing less and being more. And I think that this short clip kind of captures that. It also features my teacher, Lizzie.
Watching the lip come over, you know, just like tucking your head and just watching all the droplets of the wave.
I'm still acknowledging the power that it has to make me feel better, more alive, more present.
Blue Mind is a feeling. It's a sensation that we get when we're in water, near water, whether we're on water. If we don't get to know the ocean, which helps us get to know ourselves, how can we love the ocean and how can we love ourselves and each other?
I grew up in a difficult time for women in surfing.
It was always very hard myself, very hard.
Kept on.
The biggest barrier to being present and connected is fear. My mental state impacts my surfing, but that's why I found it so challenging and so awakening.
If we fail to connect with what it is that we love, then we can lose sight of what was important to us in the first place.
And I'm just going to skip over this slide because I can see that we're running out of time, and I'm just going to leave with this question. If not you, who? And if not now, when? And so if you are interested in exploring a bit more about how blue space can help you to see things differently, or you would like some support on how to reframe your fears into actions, then reach out to me. I see clients one-to-one on the beach or via Zoom, and I always encourage nature connection. And I do have this mini retreat, which is coming up, which is on Zoom, but it will provide a space for reflection and support you to find your flow state. I'm a firm believer that to help others and the planet, it must first start with you. And in this retreat, we will explore how to balance your routines, connect with the best version of yourself, flow out of scarcity mindset and into abundance. And it is a space of feminine energy for anyone who identifies as a woman. So sorry, guys. I will in a minute drop a link to that in the chat. But I just want to finish this talk as Wallace J. Nichols ends his book, Blue Mind. All I really want to say is this: get in the water, walk along the water, move across its surface, get under it, sit in it, leap into it, listen to it, touch the water, close your eyes and drink a big glass, fall more deeply in love with water in all its shapes, colours and forms. Let it heal you and make you a better version of yourself. You need water and water needs you now. I wish you water. And that is it from me, unless you have any questions. Oh, and I will just drop in the chat the link to that retreat, and there are 5 early bird spaces available at a discounted rate to those who want to book that. So, any questions? And if not, I know I have run over quite a bit, so if not, then no worries. You can get in touch with me on clareosborn.com. And yeah, I will share, I will just
Thanks so much, Claire. That was just so interesting and yeah, inspiring and lovely, and yeah. I just it made me think I was really lucky in my old flat to have this sort of wild space that backed onto the local railway line, and I dug a pond out there, and I think I dug it in sort of like September, and by the following spring it was amazing. I got like 1 string of pond plant and it multiplied, and I had frog spawn, and like all the plant, like all around the pond there were loads of plants, and just everything kind of like just came out of it all by itself. Just, I didn't do anything, you know, it was a natural pond with no pumps and things, and it just, yeah, it just kind of like created by itself, and just seeing that really, yeah, really was just amazing. And then I learned a lot more about like wetlands and the water, and how much of an impact these tiny little things can make. Yeah, so it really, yeah, this is really, yeah, really connect with it. So thank you so much.
No worries. Yeah, let nature do its thing. It is generally the thing that has the answers. We have the science and the technology to fix everything, and it's called nature. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching to the end. Thank you for coming. Do get in touch if you have any questions or want to know anything else about anything that I've spoken about. And other than that, I think that's it from me. I will hang on the line for anyone who does want to hang back and ask me any questions, but otherwise, thank you very much for coming.